everyone, and welcome to another episode of Yalla, the podcast of Jewish students, brought to you by the Union of Jewish Students for the UK and Ireland. I'm Sami, and I'm your president for this year.
And I'm Rebecca, UJS Sabbatical Officer responsible for Israel engagement and mental health.
On today's episode of Yalla, we're joined by two remarkable peace activists at the forefront of the movement for Israeli-Palestinian reconciliation, as well as Leeds JSOC BNOC and Yalla founder Matty Fisher. Hi Matty, and welcome back to another episode of Yalla.
Thank you, Sami. It's great to be back. And we are so pleased to be joined today by Meshi Koren, a global economic news reporter and peace advocate from Israel, and Lana Aiklan, a Palestinian activist from East Jerusalem. Both Meshi and Lana are deeply involved in grassroots initiatives aimed at promoting human rights, equality, and peaceful coexistence between Israelis and Palestinians. Even now, when this work is so difficult, they are standing up for a future they want to see and believe both people deserve. Meshi, Lana, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Can each of you tell us a bit about your journey and what led you to this form of activism?
I'm Israeli, born and raised. My accent's a bit deceiving. My mom's American. I have an American citizenship. That's why I sound like that. I was born in the Galilee, born and raised. I currently live in Jaffa. What brought me to peace activism is hope. I think in the region it's really difficult to often find hope in between and during our wars. There wasn't any aha moment for me. It was a slow, gradual process into peace activism, but it's what keeps me going today.
So obviously I'm a Palestinian. I also have a very American accent, and that's because I was born and raised in Louisiana, Baton Rouge. So from the most southern of South states in the U.S. But both my parents are Palestinian. My dad is from Jerusalem. My mother is from the occupied territories of the West Bank, from Ramallah. And my aha moment was when I was actually 8 years old, and my mother was crossing a checkpoint, and she was detained by a Israeli soldier. And it's because she didn't know that she needed certain papers to cross a checkpoint, just because she was from the West Bank. So that was kind of my moment of realization that, like, oh, there's another side that doesn't like us, like, or there's like my existence as a Palestinian is apparently a threat. So that was very difficult, but at 16 years old, I joined a camp called Tomorrow's Women, where it takes 8 Israelis and 8 Palestinians all the way to Santa Fe, New Mexico, to talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And it was there where I finally interacted with the other side, which was remarkable, and talking about activism and peace and compassionate listening and dialogue. And I think it was from there where I knew, like, 1, I started to embrace my Palestinian identity, and 2, I knew that activism is something I really want to work in.
So you kind of touched on it just then, Lana, but as someone born in the US but living in East Jerusalem, how has your kind of cross-cultural experience shaped your activism today?
It was a cultural shock, like going all the way from the States to a very, like, more conserved community. In East Jerusalem, as you guys may know, it's mainly Arab. It's Arab populated. Of course, there are Israeli settlements surrounding it, but East Jerusalem is Arab populated. And from the Arab population, I do get kind of the comments of, you are a normalizer, you're a whitewasher of the occupation. And for me, it's like, you can sit here and call me a normalizer and a whitewasher, but I think it's crucial that I want to live here I want to have self-determination as a Palestinian, and equal rights and justice and, freedom. But I also want my Israeli or Israeli Jewish friends also to live side by side with me with equality, freedom, self-determination, and justice. And I always say, like, you guys can call me that all you want, but at the end of the day, I'm doing something that benefits me, it benefits you, and it benefits our future generations. So I take it in, I handle it, but I know what I'm doing is worth it.
And actually, moving on to, you mentioned you came from a kibbutz in northern Israel. How did your early experiences shape your political views?
So I grew up in Gesher, which is not that far from Lebanon. It's just a few minutes drive from the northern border. But the Galilee itself, other than being the most beautiful part of the country, is also a good example for coexistence, in my opinion. I know in other areas of the country, Arab villages and kibbutzim or Jewish communities don't necessarily interact or get along, but in the Galilee, we live side by side, peacefully together, sharing our culture, sharing our food. I was telling Lana the day I got my driver's license and could drive around without a chauffeur or an adult, I went to eat hummus in Kfar Yassif, which is the birthplace or the Mahmoud Darwish, the Palestinian national poet, used to live there. So it has a significance in Palestinian culture. But for me, it was the place we go to eat hummus. And it was a normal thing to do without the tension that other areas of the country experience. But as well, because it's so close to the northern border, I grew up under rocket fire from Hezbollah, but so did my Palestinian counterparts in the neighboring villages. So in the end, we all share a fate. And I think that understanding has shaped the way I see the conflict and the way I see a shared future.
And kind of on that, and you talked a lot about shared futures and kind of moving forward. What does peace mean to both of you personally, and how do you envision it in the context of Israel and Palestine?
Would you like me to start?
Yeah, I need a minute.
Peace will only be achieved if both sides feel like they have self-determination and safety. And Jews, Israelis want and deserve the state that we have, and Palestinians want and deserve the exact same thing. They want to be free, they want self-determination, and that's what they need to get in order for Israelis to also feel safe. And only from then, we can really have true peace and true coexistence. Both sides need to feel like they can trust the other side in order for everyone to feel good and actually have sustainable peace.
Honestly, I second what Mishi says. Like, if there's self-determination for both people, then it's then where you can see that the possibility of coexistence is a lot higher. But yeah, 100%.
And can you tell us a bit more about the peace programs that you've been involved with, like New Story Leadership and Din B'Yachad, Standing Together?
So I can start off with saying I currently work as an English communications associate with Standing Together. Last night I was actually at an event for UK friends of Standing Together, so I spoke with them and I met them in person, which was really, really nice. I was also, as I mentioned, in Tomorrow's Women. That's kind of like where my peace activism began. And from then I also went to Echo Peace Middle East, where I was in a training program for social media talking about environmental and sustainability within the West Bank. And afterwards, I wanted to continue, and that's when I found Standing Together. And it's the largest Arab grassroots movement in Israel right now that is making an active change on the ground to achieve, one, our short-term goal is to end the war and bring the hostages back home. But the long-term goal is to achieve a sustainable Israeli-Palestinian peace. So it's amazing. I love it.
I'm not affiliated with Standing Together, but I am a huge advocate of the organization. I've been to demonstrations and events held by Standing Together, and I truly believe it's a important grassroots organization in the region. I have participated in New Story Leadership and She Leads, which is a sub-program of the same organization that both of them bring Israelis and Palestinians to either the US. I did it on Zoom during COVID, unfortunately. But it's a platform not only for dialogue so much, but trying to envision a future using other conflicts, speaking to other leaders from around the world. And I believe it's really important to bring Israelis and Palestinians together in order to move forward, even if we disagree on some subjects, which is 100% legitimate, makes total sense. We grew up in different environments, so it really makes a lot of sense that we won't necessarily agree on everything. But the fact that we can have civil disagreement is very important. And I think that's also something y'all can learn from us. It's really important to be able to have tough conversations, and agree to disagree.
Yeah, it's something we have like a leadership fellowship program, and when we take them to on trips, we kind of engage with all different sides and kind of really introduce them to this like idea of political discomfort and making sure that they're able to kind of grapple with views that might not be the same as theirs, but it's important for them to kind of understand. I think it's definitely something that over the next year we need to work on, and as like we move forward, definitely. Lana, you kind of spoke about it before, but I wonder if both of you have kind of ideas on this, but how do you address kind of the skepticism or apathy that many people feel towards peace efforts and kind of the pushback you might receive?
Can you repeat the question, honey? How, when they show what? Apathy?
And like skepticism or kind of pushback on your
Like
efforts,
basically
I think.
say like what you're doing makes no
Yeah.
sense. Okay. So yeah, basically, that's if anyone didn't notice, that was a nice way of saying how do you act with people who call you naive? I was asked this question on a speaking tour that I did in the United States, where someone asked me, how do you react to people calling you naive or like head in the clouds type of person for believing that peace is possible? And I'm like, okay, first of all, it was rude that they said that. Second of all, what's naive is thinking that the constant cycle of bloodshed, death, destruction, and despair is the only solution that we have. That's being naive. That the current reality that Israeli and Palestinians, both people, are living in right now is the only solution. That's being naive. But to do what we do, that's not being naive. That's being brave. That's looking the monster in the eye and saying, I'm not scared of you. Let's face it. Like let's do what we got to do. And I'm proud of it. So whoever wants to call me naive, go for it. I have something back to say. I'm spicy like that.
Yeah, we hear that a lot, that you're naive. It's naive I agree with Lana. It's naive to think that the only way moving forward is what we've had so far. I think it takes leadership to have vision, to imagine a different future for us. And personally, I have 2 degrees in international relations and political science. I don't think I'm naive. I think I'm very well educated on the subject. And I open my ears, I open my heart to listen to Palestinians, to understand what they're going through in order to understand my own experience as well. On the ground, people are consumed by fear and hate and anger. And those are understandable emotions, but they're unhealthy emotions, and they're unhelpful. And in order to feel better about ourselves and to have hope and to be able to have some peace of mind, I think peace is the only way forward. And standing together also says, and I truly believe this, you can't have security without peace. There's no security with war. That's a fact of life. Yeah. Only peace can bring security to Israelis and Palestinians. And I think that's such a simple thing to understand, but it's deeply important to hold on to that.
And you touched on some, but what do you think are the most significant barriers to peace today?
The patriarchy. We have really bad leadership on both sides, all male. Netanyahu, Yahya Sinwar, have self-interest in mind rather than our people's. And I truly believe in order for my Palestinian counterparts to have the freedoms that I have, they need female leadership, they need women in charge, because our current leadership has failed us. And I think women know how to do the job without engaging in violence. And that doesn't mean that men are inherently bad. It just means that the patriarchy's rules and
Hey, baby.
And
some men are bad, but not all.
And on that, you were talking about your work in grassroots movements, Israel leadership, and Omdim Yachad. How do you think grassroots movements compare to like top-level diplomatic efforts from people like Bibi and others to create meaningful change?
I have a good answer for that. Okay. I'll tell you what it is. What I like about Omdim Biyachad, or like SNS as well, like we're here, like of course we're standing together, but there's also SNS, there's also Women Wage Peace. What I love is that these are people on the ground. This is the society in itself. I'm sorry, but the three stooges we got back home, which is Bibi, Smotrich, Ben Gvir, that's what I call them, and then you have the awful leadership in Gaza, that's Hamas. Hey Hamas. You have these awful leaderships who give zero care about the people and that are only clinging onto their power and jeopardizing our lives day after day. And you sit here and you notice that the people, literally the people, are all together, no matter what their race, ethnicity, religion is, all calling for the same thing. A deal to be made, for the hostages to come back home, and for an end to the war. That's it, we're done. And I feel like the people are the ones who should have the power, because we know what's best for us. The people above only know what's best for them. It's their own interest. And honestly, enough. Like, it's been a year. In war terms, but for Palestinians, it's been like a lot longer than that. But it's awful. I think socialism, like we should rise to socialism. We should rise to like people like taking over and like because we know what's best for us. We know what's good for us. The people in power don't.
I will say, from a systemic point of view, I do think there's room for both types of efforts. Bibi Netanyahu, I wouldn't call a diplomat at all. I think he obstructs diplomacy. Our diplomats aren't able to do their job because of leaders like Bibi. But there's definitely room for top-down work as well as grassroots organizations. They don't cancel each other out. They have to come together in order for us to actually find, to move forward.
You both kind of touched on it a bit, but like I'd love to hear more about like your ideas on female leadership. Like you've talked about a lot about like female empowerment and the need for more female leaders. I mean, we see it here in like the past 2 years. Before my campaign, there have been no female candidates for UJS president, and as a female leader, like
Show you like
female empowerment is very important to us and kind of one of our goals this year at UJS. So I'd love to hear more about your thoughts.
As a woman, I'm done with men. Had enough of this male leadership. I'm done. Y'all have done enough. It's time to go. Like in Tomorrow's Women, we're all women. We're all women in that camp. And so a question that was asked is like, why not men? And I literally look at the crowd and I just stare at them for a good minute. And like, that's the only answer they need, which is men, not all, but most. Y'all have done enough, Let us women who are more, not you. You're doing a great job.
Doing great, Susie.
Also, everyone behind the camera, loving it. But like, men I think women, I think just the fact that we contain so much like empathy and that I feel like we're just like, we know how to like, for me, I personally believe like women can balance emotion and logic so well. And I feel like what Meshi mentioned is like we can approach things without getting violent. And like, I think if there was more women leadership, and like in diverse women leadership within Israeli society, within the Palestinian society, I think it would make the biggest of a difference. Like it would be great.
Women, being a sidelined group, have a different perspective on things. And when we are able to show those different perspectives, we're able to work better together. I think generally speaking, women are often more engaged in democratic cooperation, less competitive strategies, and we understand that the world doesn't operate on a zero-sum game. And I think that's really important to remember in the context also of the conflict. This isn't a zero-sum game. It can't be. There are too many people's lives dependent on finding a sustainable, peaceful solution to our conflict. And men have had their chance. They most of the times chose war, and I think it's time to choose discourse.
And you touched on it before about kind of the grassroots movement to the feet on the ground. We obviously represent Jewish students here in the UK and Ireland. What role, if anything, do you think the people who are not Israeli or Palestinian and aren't living in the region have to play in bringing about a reality of peace?
Like I said to the campus students back in LA, I'm gonna say it to every student who isn't Jewish or who isn't Palestinian or who isn't Israeli. It's so easy to choose a side during this time, and it's so easy to say I'm pro this or I'm pro that. But I think that this is a time where you need to stop choosing a side, stop falling into this very polarized discourse and the nuances that are happening, and think to help us don't choose a side, but choose the path of humanity instead. It makes the biggest difference when people say, okay, let's look at this in a more human perspective. We don't want to see people in Gaza suffering anymore. We want the hostages to go back home. People who were displaced, Israelis who were displaced in the north and the south, deserve to go back home as well. And what's going on in the West Bank, the raids that are happening in the West Bank, it's also awful. And it's been like the biggest raid since wow, I don't remember when.
Since the
it's like
second
an intifada. And you see all this and you're like, stop being pro this, stop being pro that. What we ask from you is to be pro humanity and to help us raise the voice of peace and activism and hope. This is what we need.
I'll add to that, maybe some humility. Don't choose sides, but also be humble enough to know that you don't understand the conflict at its full. None of us do. Me and Lana could have hours of conversation about our different experiences and other people's perspectives and different histories. And there's so much complexity and nuance in our conflict that it is impossible to choose a side and to be right about it. There's no right side to this. There's no one truth. To every fact you'll show me that's pro-Palestinian, I can show you another fact that's pro-Israeli. They always balance each other out because our histories are actually intertwined. We have lived side by side for centuries during British colonialism, prior to it, and after it. I just ask, try and educate yourself, but also not be so vehemently sure that you're always correct. Remember that there's always information that you don't know about, and there's no reason to just assume you're always on the absolute right side. I don't think there is a right side in this conflict.
I think that's such like a beautiful and kind of important message
Yeah.
especially for anyone listening, that kind of we've seen in the past year on campus, kind of so many people choosing a side and not not really kind of looking into it, doing their own research, and just running with whatever they see. So I think that's just such a lovely message.
So to all those students out there, those 1-minute TikTok videos that explain Israel and Palestine, it's not it. It's not it.
So how has kind of the post-October 7th war impacted your activism, your work, and what you both are so passionate about doing?
Some days I'm very hopeful, and some days I'm very numb. There are random moments like where I'll be working and standing together and I'm like really into it. I'm like, yes, we're doing great. Yes, we're doing something. And then there are days where I go to work and it's like, I'm just not, like a bombing will happen and indiscriminate bombing will happen in Gaza, and I'll like see all this horrible footage and I wouldn't want to like work. Like I'll sometimes feel guilty about being a peace activist. At the end of the day, I'm human, you know? And I just won't want to be doing anything. And there are days where I spend hours crying, like where one video will just trigger me. And then I'll like cry and cry and cry. And then someone from work will be like, are you okay? And I'll be like, listen, I really can't look at you right now. Like I can't. And they have nothing to do with it. But it's just, it's at that moment where it's like, I need to like remember that it's not them. It's like the government. It's the military. It's not the people who are working by my side and care about me. You know, at the end of the day, I say I'm human. So that attitude that I get, or that feeling that I get, pushes me even further to fight for peace and for a better future for everyone, because I don't want to feel that anymore. Even if it was just for a moment, I can't stand it. So it's difficult, but it's worth it.
We're bombarded with bad news all the time. I work as a journalist and I get notifications from my newspaper all the time about alarms here, bombings there. It's really difficult to stay focused, and it's difficult not to be sad all the time. I have to say that after October 7th, it was really difficult to be online, seeing what mostly other people are saying about us. But I shout out to the Third Narrative, Unapologetic, Amira and Ibrahim. They really gave me hope. I'd recommend, it's a podcast by two Palestinian Israelis that talk about the conflict from a peace builder's perspective. And they gave me so much hope. And people like Amira and Ibrahim and people like Lana and other peace builders are a beacon of hope for a lot of us in the region. It's really easy to fall to negative emotions. Sometimes we cry. Yeah, recently when the bodies of the 6 hostages were found, it was difficult to continue going on. We have work, and we still need to do that work. While crying, but that's our reality, and we have to find reason to push forward.
And since October, so you speak about like how it's been tough online and been tough some days, like with your colleagues and stuff like that. Have you found it to be hard since October 7th with your activism in your own communities? Like what the feedback's been from them? Has it been harder? Anything like that?
I think when it comes to standing together, we have done an amazing job at having Israeli society not just say bring them home, but bring them home and sign a deal to end the war. Do you know what it means to take a whole ass society, excuse me for my profanities, and for them to go from just to bring them home, like what would they say? What was it in Hebrew?
What do you mean?
Bring them home.
Mm-hmm.
What was it in Hebrew?
Well, it's actually often said in English.
Yeah, so bring them home, from bring them home, okay, to Iskar Shav, which means a deal now. That's insane. Like, and Standing Together was one of the organizations that was like saying that from the get-go. Bring them home, end the war. Then you had Israeli society who was fed up that said bring them home, from just bring them home to make a deal right now for them to come back home and for all of this to be over. So I think activism, like even though it takes a minute, like a hot minute, it gets there eventually. So that's kind of like the attitude that I see when it comes to like activism back home. It's great.
And as we approach the first anniversary of October 7th, how do you envisage this being marked outside of Israel?
That I genuinely don't know. I think the memories of the people we lost on October 7th should be honored. Unfortunately, in Israel, it's a political issue now with the government doing its own ceremony and a large part of the population disavowing that ceremony because we don't believe that the government has our best interest, and we don't believe them when they say they care about the hostages because they haven't done enough to bring them home. Outside of Israel, it's hard for me to say because I haven't experienced what you've experienced here on the ground. I think the memories of the people lost should be honored without it being politicized and connected to whether you agree or disagree with the government of Israel. I think it's really important just to humanize us. We're not just Israelis, we're not just Palestinians or Gazans. We're people with families who have lost a lot. And that's what we should put in the forefront, in my opinion. The actual people that lost their lives, whether they were peace activists or extreme right-wingers or Palestinians, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, we're planting 1,200 trees as part of UJS, kind of in memory of all the lives lost on October 7th, with 18 in one like main garden, and then sending the rest kind of as a "we will grow for you" kind of. It might have ended then, your lives might have ended then, but kind of we're continuing your memory and helping students kind of create kind of a ceremony, have a minute silence, and kind of take the politics away. Is what we're saying. It's like have it as a kind of day to remember what happened, but also remember that it's still going on. It's not yet over, as much as we all wish it was.
I have a question for you guys. I'm sure you have a diverse group of people you represent from different political affiliations, whether right-wing or left-wing. Have you tried to hold meaningful conversations with a diverse group of people about the war? I'm sure there are people that are far left that want to talk about Palestinians in Gaza, and some that don't. Have you managed to find a way to engage in that conversation in a fruitful way?
So one of our plans for this coming year is to have kind of all different ranges of political views kind of on a panel discussing their thoughts and their viewpoints. In the past year, we took a cohort of 40 students on this leadership fellowship on a trip to Israel, and kind of they met with President Herzog, but they also met with
the Palestinian mayoral candidate for Jerusalem.
And kind of on that trip, there were students who would have felt comfortable in one of those sessions, but not comfortable in the other, and like for both sides, and they both had to be in both groups, and at the end of the day, having processing sessions and discussing what they heard and kind of what they saw, and it was all kind of what I was saying before about political discomfort, kind of making sure that if they went to one session, they had to go in the other, whether they felt comfortable or not, and they had to listen to their views and understand. That kind of, that's, I'm trying to think of words, but kind of that's how people are feeling, and that's their thoughts. I mean, Matty was on the trip.
I was on that trip last year, and we got a wide range of people from different political perspectives, from both the Israeli-Palestinian side, activists from both sides. Usually would actually take the trip into Ramallah to go there, but because of this year it was just not safe to do so, so we didn't this year, but I think in future years it'd be something looked at. But but it was an incredibly informative trip. I know personally, I learned a lot from the trip. I was running as staff one of the processing groups each night, and the range of conversations from such a different range of students. We had students who are more like Orthodox Jewish, who are more on the right side of like Israeli politics. We had some on the left, all in one group, just discussing it and having a respectful conversation, talking about what they had listened to, what they have heard. It was, I believe, a truly impactful and remarkable trip.
And something that we're really passionate about in the Israel engagement part of what I do is that we want Jewish students to be engaging with the Israel that they want to see in the world, and whether that is how it looks now or the hope that they have for how it will look in the future, we want to make sure that we're facilitating them to hear from all sides of the spectrum, so that whatever opinion they land on is an informed and empowered one, regardless of what it is.
I guess kind of on that, one of our policies, we have kind of an annual convention and conference where students come, they propose motions, and it guides kind of our work. One of our policies that we've had and for decades have supported is for a two-state solution. So kind of what do you both see as a successful end goal for peace? Is it a two-state, one-state, three-state, federated state, hybrid, or something else entirely? What would you say?
Asked me about a year ago, I would have said, or even now, I would say a one-state solution. In a utopian world, I would see Jews and Israelis living on the same land and everything is okay. And not kumbaya type of stuff, but like just like more peaceful, hand in hand type of reality. But it doesn't work like that. So I think in order to reach that, we need to start with the two-state solution, where each Palestinians have a state, Israelis have a state, and through that we build into one state. That's kind of how I see it going.
Yeah, I think it's a nice idea to have one state. It sounds really nice in theory, but Palestinians deserve a state of their own. They're striving for self-determination. And I think one state just won't give them that. And Jews want a state of their own. We have it. We want to keep it. You probably know about existential threat in the Jewish community, fearing the loss of self-determination. It's very important to many Jews and Israelis. And we won't be able to actually have self-determination without Palestinians having self-determination as well. So definitely the two-state solution is the only way forward. How does that come about? I think there are some good plans out there. We just need the leadership to actually engage with them and imagine a better future for us.
We need a leadership to change. That's what we need.
Mm-hmm.
And if you could change one thing about the current discourse on Israeli-Palestinian conflict, what would it be?
The discourse?
Stop choosing sides.
Literally, just stop it. Khalas.
It doesn't work like that. Me and Lana live on the same land. We share the same public transport. We shit on men.
Exactly. I'm sorry. You guys,
our sabbatical team this year is this 6% Sami, and it's all girls except for one. One of the guys, Josh. It wasn't on purpose. It was not on purpose. But he's going to be an empowered woman by the end of the year.
That's great.
Israelis and Palestinians share a lot of things in common. All of humanity. I think it's important to remember that we share more commonalities than we have differences. And there's no reason to choose a side, because if you are adamantly only one side, you will never be able to engage with the other, and that's not how peaceful resolution works.
And finally, what would you like to ask our listeners who are listening today, Jewish students from across the UK and Ireland, what would you like them to do to help bring about peace between Israeli and Palestinians?
support organizations like this. Spread our message. Spread the message of solutions, not sides. Spread the message of standing together. Women Wage Peace. Tomorrow's Women. There are so many peace organizations. Spread their messages because they honestly know what they're saying. We know what's best for us. So I think that's one of the greatest ways to help out. And there's also the possibility of make yourself a little uncomfortable by knowing things that you refuse to open up to or know about, or that you were too scared to in the beginning. I think one of the biggest parts of being a peace builder is getting comfortable in the uncomfortable. And I think once you do that, it makes a big difference.
Everything Lana said.
Ditto.
So sadly, that brings us to the end of today's episode of Yalla, the podcast of Jewish students. We hope this conversation has provided valuable insights into the realities of peace activism and the important work being done by individuals like Meshi and Lana.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by the complexities of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but today's discussion reminds us that there are people on the ground working tirelessly for peace, justice, and a better future for all. It's voices like Beshi's and Lana's that inspire hope and show us what's possible when we come together to create change.
And a massive thank you once again to our amazing guests for coming and sharing their experiences, wisdom with us. And a big thank you to you, our listeners, for listening in. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe on wherever you see listen to your podcast, or on YouTube if you'd like to watch it. Make sure to share it and share it with others who are also passionate about peace building.
You can follow UJS on all the socials, UJS_UK, for updates on future episodes, events, and opportunities.
If anything in this podcast or events on campus have been triggering in any way, don't forget that UJS has a 24/7 dedicated welfare support line open. You can call us on 020-7424-3281 to speak to one of our experienced staff or volunteers.
Don't forget to tune in next time to hear more incredible stories and meet some amazing people on Yalla, the podcast of Jewish students. But for now, it's been great to be back, but it's goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me. See you and you on campus soon.
Bye.
Bye.